since his only living family, his aunt, left him at 14 to get married and start her own family. Victor had to learn to live on his own and fend for himself, working multiple jobs at a young age. Because of his age, it was hard to find work, and when he did, he was often underpaid and cheated despite working long hours. Through years of hard work and resilience, he managed to put himself through school and eventually land a proper job. By then, without even realizing it, Victor had developed chronic insomnia. The years of stress and little to no sleep had caught up to him. He would lie in bed for hours each night, waiting for sleep that never came. Eventually, he'd give up and return to work, like always. With so much time on his hands and a strong work ethic, he quickly climbed the ladder, earning multiple promotions. Money was no longer a problem, but rest still was. Over time, he became irritable and angry without even noticing. His subordinates feared him and avoided working with him. During the day, he drowned himself in work. Most nights, he ended up at a bar, drinking. But even alcohol offered no escape. No matter how much he drank, he never got drunk. He had tried therapy and various medications, but nothing helped. In the end, he had no choice but to accept that this was his reality. One night, Victor headed to his usual bar to grab a drink. As soon as he got there, he started ordering drink after drink until they suddenly stopped coming. When he asked why, the bartender told him he couldn't serve him anymore because it wasn't healthy. Victor scoffed, taken aback. That's when he noticed the bartender wasn't the usual one. Victor began to get visibly annoyed. The regular bartender never questioned how many drinks he ordered. He demanded to be served by the regular guy instead, but was told he wasn't available. The one in front of him, Sammy, was filling in for him. Victor told Sammy to mind his own business and just make his drink, but Sammy refused. Victor replied sarcastically, "Do you offer therapy services along with your bartending job?" Sammy smiled and said, "I'm not a therapist, but I believe a problem shared is a problem half solved." Victor shot back, "And how exactly are you going to help me solve it?" Sammy responded, "I wouldn't know unless you told me what the problem is." Victor sighed, realizing he wasn't going to get another drink. He looked at Sammy, who was still smiling at him kindly. Victor tried to think about what his problem was, but all he could come up with was that he felt empty inside and he couldn't sleep. Before he could say anything, some customers came over, asking for drinks, and Sammy had to attend to them. Sammy asked, "My shift ends soon. Will you wait for me to talk?" Victor just stared at him without answering. Sammy quickly made him a mocktail and said, "You can drink this." Victor took it, and to his surprise, found himself actually drinking it and waiting. He couldn't believe it. Was he really that desperate to talk to someone? As he sat there watching Sammy serve drinks with a smile, he realized he couldn't even remember the last time he smiled like that himself. Sammy finally finished his shift, and Victor had waited the whole time. Sammy walked over and asked, "Should we talk here, or take a walk?" "Walking seems fine," Victor said, standing up and leading the way. They walked down the street side by side in silence until Sammy spoke. "You know, even though both my parents are alive, I've had to fend for myself for as long as I can remember." Victor glanced at him. "Why?" "My dad's a lazy, alcoholic bum who keeps getting fired," Sammy answered. "And my mom only knows how to spend money. I'm like their personal bank." "That must be hard," Victor replied, knowing too well how it felt to look after yourself from a young age. Sammy nodded. "I'll move out soon. Once I get the job I applied for, then I won't have to deal with them anymore." "You'll get accepted," Victor said. "I hope so." Sammy smiled, then went on, "Since I told you my life story, it's only fair you tell me why you tried to drink the whole bar dry. What reality are you trying to escape?" "I just can't sleep," Victor said. "Huh?" He explained his chronic insomnia. Sammy looked at him softly. "I can imagine how frustrating that is." "It is. My grandmother used to struggle with falling asleep too," Sammy said. "No treatment helped, until I massaged her head once, and she fell asleep. From then on, whenever I gave her a head massage, she'd sleep like a baby. I've actually been told I have magic hands and can make anyone relax under my touch. Do you want to give it a try?" Victor let out a small chuckle. "Mine isn't a regular insomnia. Just a head massage won't make me sleepy." "Well, you've got nothing to lose." Victor sat while Sammy moved behind him and began the head massage. As Sammy began, Victor sat there with no hope, waiting to prove to Sammy there really wasn't any kind of massage that could make him sleep. But just then, he started to feel his body relaxing and his eyelids getting heavy. He hadn't felt like this in a long time. Before he knew it, his eyes were shut and had already fallen into a deep sleep. Sammy didn't notice Victor had drifted off until he heard a soft snore. Startled, he glanced down and saw Victor fast asleep. "I thought no massage could make you sleep," he muttered in disbelief. Realizing they were outside, Sammy knew he couldn't leave Victor on a park bench, but he didn't know where Victor lived, and taking him home to his own parents was out of the question. They would only shamelessly pester him for money. Sammy tried shaking Victor awake, but he wouldn't budge. If not for the gentle snoring, Sammy might have thought he was dead. After a quick search, Sammy found Victor's car keys. The bar's parking garage was secure, with cameras and guards, so letting Victor sleep in his car seemed safest. Grunting with effort, Sammy hauled Victor onto his back, carried him to the garage, located the car, and settled him in the back seat. He draped his own jacket over Victor's shoulders so he wouldn't get cold. Before leaving, Sammy ran inside, grabbed a pen and sticky note, and wrote his phone number, asking Victor to call or text when he got home safely. He stuck the note on the dashboard and headed out. Victor slept straight through morning and afternoon, finally waking in the evening. He felt lighter than he had in years. Confused, he found himself in his car with Sammy's jacket over him. Spotting the dark sky outside, he assumed he'd napped only a short while, until he checked his phone. He'd slept for hours and missed work for the first time ever. Shocked, all he could think was, Sammy's massage actually worked. Instead of calling the office to explain, Victor hurried into the bar to find Sammy. The sticky note had blown out of the window, so he had no number. Inside, the staff told him Sammy wasn't a regular employee, just a one-time substitute. They didn't know if he would ever return. Victor's heart sank. He hadn't felt this rested in years. If Sammy's hands could do that, Victor was willing to pay any price to have that head massage every day. First, though, he had to find him. In the days that followed, Victor visited the bar every night, not to drink, but hoping to see Sammy again, since it was the only place he could think of finding him. Desperate for another good night's sleep, he even tried several massage parlors, asking them to massage his head the way Sammy did, but none of them worked. Having finally tasted real rest after so long, Victor grew more and more frustrated when he couldn't get it again. His crankiness worsened, and his office staff bore the brunt of it. Meanwhile, Sammy finally received an acceptance email from the company he'd interviewed with. The job came with company housing, so he packed his things and ready to move out of his parents' house right away. The next day, he reported to his new job. Nervous but excited, he was shown to his department. It was his first time working a corporate job, and he didn't know what to expect. His nerves settled a bit when he was warmly welcomed by his new colleagues, until they started warning him about their cranky boss, which made his anxiety spike again. As they spoke, everyone suddenly went silent, looking tense as they returned to their desks. Sammy turned toward the entrance and there stood Victor. Sammy's eyes widened in surprise. Quietly, he leaned toward a colleague and asked, "Is that the boss you were talking about?" She nodded. At the same moment, Victor stood frozen, stunned to see Sammy standing right in front of him after days of searching. A wide smile broke across his face, and without thinking, he walked up and hugged Sammy tightly. "I finally found you." The entire office stared in shock. They had never seen Victor smile like that or show that kind of warmth to anyone. Sammy stood stiffly, equally stunned. He hadn't expected such a reaction from Victor. Realizing how out of character he was acting, Victor quickly pulled back. "Sorry, I was just relieved to see you. I've been searching for you for days." Sammy asked. "Why?" Victor hesitated. To return your jacket." Sammy said. "You could have just called me. I left my number on a note so you could text me when you got home safe. I was actually worried about leaving you like that." Victor blinked. "I didn't see any note," Sammy answered. "It must have flown away." The office continued watching them, exchanging glances and clearly curious about what was going on between them. Noticing the attention, Victor cleared his throat and shifted the topic. "So, you're the new employee?" Sammy nodded with a bright smile. "This is the company you were hoping to get into?" Victor asked. "Yeah," Sammy replied. "Congratulations," Victor said. "If you have trouble with anything, don't hesitate to ask me. My office is right over there." With that, he turned and walked away. Now that Victor had found Sammy, he wondered what to do next. How could he convince Sammy to give him a head massage every night so he could sleep? The moment Sammy sat at his new desk, curious coworkers crowded around, asking about his connection to their usually cranky boss. Sammy insisted there was none, but they didn't believe him. They had never seen Victor act that way with anyone. While settling in, Sammy got a call from the movers. They had already finished bringing his things to the company apartment, and he needed to check on it. Nervous about asking for leave on his first day, he walked to Victor's office, knocked, and stepped inside. To his surprise, Victor granted permission right away and even offered to drive him. Sammy tried to refuse, but Victor insisted. The ride felt awkward for Sammy. It was odd to be alone now that Victor was his boss. As Sammy gave directions, Victor remarked that the road looked familiar. Sammy explained it was company housing. Victor's suspicions grew. He lived on the same street. They arrived, and sure enough, it was Victor's place too. Sammy hadn't expected his boss to be his housemate. Victor offered to help carry and unpack Sammy's boxes. Sammy protested, but Victor wouldn't take no for an answer. While they worked, Sammy admitted he'd imagined Victor living in a big house, not a small company apartment. Victor shrugged. What's the use of a big house if I can't even get a good night's sleep? Your insomnia? Sammy asked softly. Victor nodded. I slept better that night because of you. Sammy grinned. Told you my hands are magical. Victor smiled back. I believe it now. They finished unpacking by nightfall. Victor showed Sammy how everything in the apartment worked, then they retreated to their separate rooms. Late at night, as usual, Victor tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. When he checked the time, it was almost midnight. Sammy could help him sleep, but he was probably already asleep himself. Still, Victor got up and quietly walked to Sammy's door. He hesitated for a moment before knocking softly. When there was no answer, he assumed Sammy was asleep and turned to leave. Just then, the door opened. Victor's heart lifted at the sound, though he didn't show it on his face. He turned back. Did I wake you? Sammy shook his head. I wasn't sleeping yet. Do you need something? Victor rubbed his hands together, unsure of how to ask. I was wondering if you could give me a head massage, like the other time, so I can sleep. Sammy smiled warmly. Of course, why not? He stepped aside and let Victor in, guiding him to sit on the bed. Do you mind if I use an essential oil I made myself? Victor replied, as long as it helps me sleep, you can use anything. Sammy went to grab the oil, then knelt on the bed in front of Victor and began the massage. Do you like the scent? He asked. Victor nodded, eyes closed. It smells relaxing. Sammy smiled, satisfied. After a few moments, Victor spoke again. Can we do this every day? Huh? Victor continued. Would you mind if I came to you every night for a head massage? At least until I can sleep on my own. He quickly added, I can pay you any amount. Sammy shook his head. You don't have to pay me. I love doing this. I'd do it for anyone, without expecting anything. Before Sammy even finished his sentence, Victor's head had already slumped onto his shoulder. He had fallen asleep. Sammy sighed, realizing he hadn't learned his lesson from the first time. He should have done the massage in Victor's room. Now, he'd have to give up his bed. Carefully, he tried to lay Victor down and shift his head onto the pillow, but as he moved, Victor instinctively grabbed him and pulled him close, hugging him like a pillow. Sammy tried to wiggle free, but Victor's grip was too strong. Eventually, he gave up, deciding to wait until Victor let go on his own. But instead, he slowly drifted off and fell asleep too, wrapped in Victor's arms. The next morning, Sammy's alarm blared loudly, jerking him awake. He found himself next to Victor, only now, he was the one holding Victor in his arms. Embarrassed, he quickly slipped out of bed and went to get ready for work. Despite the loud alarm, Victor didn't stir. Sammy considered waking him but decided to shower first, thinking Victor would probably be up by the time he was done. But when he returned from the bathroom, Victor was still sound asleep. Sammy moved closer to check if he was even breathing. He was. He tapped Victor gently, then harder with each attempt, but Victor didn't move. In the end, Sammy leaned over and let the water drip from his wet hair onto Victor's face. After a few drops, Victor's eyes flew open, only to be met with Sammy's face inches from his. Sammy stumbled back a little, caught off guard. I tried waking you, but you wouldn't budge, he mumbled, quickly turning away to put on a shirt. Victor sat up, rubbing his eyes. What time is it? Almost 8 a.m. Sammy replied. Victor nodded calmly. He was definitely going to be late, but even if he rushed, he'd still be late, so there was no point in panicking. Sammy glanced at him, surprised by how relaxed he seemed. You're not going to work today? I am, Victor replied. Will you wait so I can drive us both? Sammy shook his head quickly. No, I don't want to be late. Victor nodded. All right, I'll leave you to get ready. Stretching with a satisfied sigh, Victor got out of bed. Finally, a good night's sleep, he said, smiling. Just before leaving the room, he added, Thank you. Sammy paused, wondering what exactly the thank you was for. The massage? For waking him up? Or for letting him sleep in his bed? Realizing he was running late, he pushed the thoughts aside and quickly got dressed. On his way out, he passed the kitchen where Victor was casually making a sandwich. I'm making one for myself, Victor said. Do you want one? Sammy, already halfway out the door, shook his head. No, thank you. I really can't be late. Victor just smiled. Okay, he said, and as the door closed behind Sammy, he mumbled to himself, You're going to be late anyway. Sammy did end up getting to work late. It didn't look good for him as a new employee to be late on his second day. As soon as he sat down and greeted his colleagues, they immediately swarmed him with questions about why he left the office with Victor the day before and what exactly was going on between them. Once again, Sammy insisted there was nothing going on. We just found out we're housemates, he explained. Everyone shivered at the thought. I'd rather sleep on the street than live with Victor, one of them muttered. Sammy blinked, confused. Was Victor really that strict with them? So far, except for their awkward first meeting at the bar, Victor had been nothing but kind to him. Eventually, everyone returned to their work, and Sammy joined in, trying to learn the ropes by asking his colleagues questions. He even offered to help some of them and ended up with more work than expected. Later in the morning, Victor arrived, carrying a bag full of coffee cups. Everyone stared in shock. Was their notoriously cold boss actually bringing coffee for the whole office? But Victor didn't even glance at anyone else. He walked straight to Sammy and set the bag down in front of him, and a lunchbox. Sammy looked up, surprised. Did you eat anything on your way here? Victor asked. Sammy shook his head. Then you can have this. I made the sandwich myself, Victor said. Sammy smiled, touched. Thank you. He reached for the bag to hand out the coffees to his colleagues, but Victor stopped him. I bought those for you. Sammy blinked. Huh? You want me to drink all of this? Victor shook his head. No, I didn't know what kind of coffee you liked, so I just ordered every drink on the menu. Sammy stared at him, speechless. The entire office did too. Victor pulled out his phone and held it out. Put in your number, so next time I can just ask what you want. Still a little dazed, Sammy entered his number. Victor smiled, taking his phone back. So, what kind of coffee do you like? Sammy mumbled. I don't drink coffee, only milk tea. Victor nodded. Got it, noted. Then, without another word or glance at anyone else, he turned and walked to his office. Sammy's colleagues exchanged amused glances, jokingly asking each other if they'd suddenly become invisible. Snapping out of it, Sammy started passing out the coffee. His co-workers raised their brows. You sure we're allowed to drink this? It was specifically for you. Sammy shrugged. What if he meant it for everyone, but just didn't know how to say it? Yeah, no. One of them replied. That man didn't even look at us. What if he's actually in love with you? Sammy quickly waved it off. That's not possible. We've only known each other for a short time. Another chimed in. People fall in love and get married in a day, you know. Sammy shook his head. Anyway, it's impossible. They exchanged looks, smirking. We'll see. Later in the day, one of Sammy's colleagues needed to submit a document for Victor to review and approve. She had already submitted it several times, and each time it was rejected, with a scolding to go along with it. Knowing Victor only seemed to be soft with Sammy, she had an idea. Maybe if Sammy submitted it instead, it would finally get approved. She approached him casually and asked if he could take the document to Victor on her behalf, without mentioning why. Sammy, always willing to help, agreed. To everyone's surprise, Sammy returned a short while later with the document approved. No scolding, no complaints. The office burst into quiet smiles. Maybe they had found the answer to dealing with Victor's crankiness. If they needed anything from him, they could just send Sammy. From then on, Sammy found himself running back and forth between his desk and Victor's office, relaying messages and turning in documents for his coworkers. He barely had time to focus on his own assignments. It wasn't until everyone else had gone home that Sammy finally sat down to get through his actual work. Just then, Victor appeared. Ready to go home? He asked. Sammy looked up. Together? Of course, Victor replied. We live together. Makes sense to leave together. Sammy hesitated. But I still have work to finish. You can finish it at home, Victor said. They'll be locking the building soon anyway. Sammy had no choice but to pack up and leave with him. On the drive home, Victor asked, should we eat out or cook at home? Sammy shook his head. I still have work to do, so I won't have time to cook. I'll do the cooking, Victor offered. Not wanting to trouble Victor, Sammy quickly said, let's just eat out. So they stopped at a restaurant, had a quick dinner, and headed home. As soon as they got in, Sammy went straight back to work. Hours passed, and Victor waited, quietly checking now and then to see if Sammy was done, so he could ask for his head massage. But Sammy was still typing away, focused on his laptop. Confused, Victor finally asked, why do you have so much to do? I haven't given you that many tasks, Sammy replied. I'm just helping out my colleagues, Victor frowned. How much work did they give you that you're still working on it? Sammy sighed. I could have finished earlier, but I was busy during the day. Victor immediately remembered how Sammy had been in and out of his office all afternoon, bringing work Victor had assigned to other employees. So that was it. Now, deep into the night, Victor grew frustrated. He still couldn't sleep, and now Sammy was fast asleep on the couch, curled up with his laptop still open. There was no way he could wake him just to ask for a massage. Grumbling, Victor headed back to his room and lay down, staring at the ceiling, sleep nowhere in sight. He clenched his jaw, blaming his office staff for piling all their work onto Sammy. If they hadn't done that, Sammy wouldn't be exhausted right now, and Victor would have been peacefully asleep by now. The next morning, Victor arrived early to work with Sammy having barely slept. His mood was already sour. When Sammy came to his office, with a document Victor distinctly remembered assigning to someone else, he snapped. Without another word, Victor marched out and scolded the entire office, calling them out for dumping their responsibilities on Sammy. Everyone froze. Sammy stood there, wide-eyed. He hadn't complained to him. Just as Victor went back, Sammy immediately explained to his colleagues, so they wouldn't misunderstand, thinking that he had complained about them to Victor. They waved him off. It's fine, we're used to him. Sammy was assigned some tasks of his own that day, but they weren't much. He finished quickly and out of habit, offered to help his co-workers again. But this time, everyone immediately refused, probably because of Victor. On their drive home, Sammy started to feel hungry, but he hesitated to say anything. Victor seemed irritated and in no mood for any requests. Just then, Sammy's stomach let out a loud growl. Victor glanced sideways. You hungry? Sammy gave a sheepish nod. Moments later, they were sitting in a restaurant, eating quietly. Later that night, back at home, Victor walked out to the kitchen to grab a glass of water and found Sammy ironing clothes for work. While sipping his drink, Victor lingered for a moment, then asked quietly, did I cause a rift between you and your colleagues? Sammy blinked. Huh? Victor looked a little hesitant. I mean, today I made it look like you complained about them. They might start avoiding you now, or even dislike you. Sammy shook his head. No, not at all. We're good, really. Victor nodded slowly. Okay, good to hear. They stood there in silence for a while. Then Victor asked again, are you going to bed after this? No, Sammy replied. Victor asked, then what will you be doing? Sammy smiled. Being a massage therapist, Victor let out a small laugh. Aren't you tired from a whole day at work? Sammy looked up and smiled wider. Nope. Besides, I promise to be your head massage therapist every night. Victor gave a satisfied smile. Going to work together every morning, coming home to share dinner, and giving Victor a head massage every night before bed became a routine for them. On weekends, with no work to rush to, they went grocery shopping together, cleaned the house side by side, and with the rest of their free time, watched TV or simply talked about anything and everything. They learned a lot about each other that way, and slowly, they grew closer. At work, Sammy remained respectful. Victor was still his boss, after all. But at home, they felt more like friends. And at work, Victor's behavior noticeably improved. He became gentler, calmer, more approachable. But his team had spent so long walking on eggshells around him that they found the sudden change hard to believe. One Friday, Sammy and his colleagues planned a small after-work hangout. Just food and drinks to unwind after the long week. No one mentioned inviting Victor, but Sammy decided to bring him along anyway. He figured it might help Victor bond with the team. And more importantly, Victor's birthday was the next day. Sammy thought it would be nice to celebrate it with everyone, even just a little. When Sammy suggested it, Victor tried to refuse. I don't want to ruin the mood. They wouldn't want me there. They never invite me to these things anyway. But Sammy insisted, tugging on his arm until he gave in. When they arrived, the place was already buzzing with conversation and laughter. Everyone had drinks in hand, chatting and enjoying themselves. But the moment Victor walked in behind Sammy, the atmosphere shifted. The talking stopped. The smiles faded. The air grew heavy. Victor turned to Sammy. I should leave. I don't want to ruin your fun. I'll see you at home. But before he could walk away, Sammy grabbed his wrist and pulled him to a seat. As they sat down, one colleague leaned towards Sammy and whispered, "Why did you bring him?" Sammy replied, "Isn't this a team hangout? He's the team leader, so it makes sense for him to be here." The colleague sighed and leaned back in silence. The whole group sat awkwardly, giving glances at each other. Victor could feel the tension. Maybe this was a chance to fix it. He began, apologizing for being difficult, mean, unreasonable and all that, and promised to be a better leader to them. Everyone just stared at him, taken aback. They never imagined a day like this. One brave soul tested the waters. Just an apology? Victor paused, thinking, how about tonight's bill is on me? They remarked, that's not enough. Victor then added, free lunch on me every day for a month? Make it 2. Someone shouted. Victor chuckled. Deal. That was all it took. Cheers erupted, laughter returned, and everyone raised their glasses in a toast. The mood was alive again. Sammy smiled softly, watching as Victor laughed and relaxed among his coworkers. It made him happy to see Victor finally connecting with them. Now felt like the right time to slip out and grab the surprise cake he had ordered for Victor. But just as he stood to leave, someone handed him a drink, saying he hadn't touched a glass since he arrived and not joining in the fun. I don't drink alcohol, Sammy replied honestly, but they all insisted. Just one. Seeing no way out of it, Sammy reluctantly agreed. 1 glass, and he'll pretend to be drunk, he thought. What he didn't know was just how low his alcohol tolerance was. 1 glass was all it took, and he was completely knocked out. Everyone at the hangout was shocked when Sammy passed out after just 1 glass. With no other option, Victor carried him home. When they arrived, Victor parked the car and was about to lift Sammy out, when Sammy suddenly opened his eyes and checked the time on his phone. You're awake? Victor asked, surprised. It was already past midnight. Sammy sighed in disappointment. He had missed the chance to bring out the birthday cake. Still clearly drunk, he stepped out of the car, stumbling toward the door. Victor quickly followed, guiding him so he wouldn't fall or crash into anything. Once inside, Sammy headed straight for the kitchen. Victor followed, concerned, thinking Sammy might do something reckless. As Sammy opened a drawer, pulled out a single candle and a lighter, and lit the candle. Just as he was about to stop him, Sammy turned around, holding the lit candle, and began singing happy birthday. Victor stood there, stunned. Emotion washed over him so fast and hard, it nearly brought tears to his eyes. He couldn't even remember the last time someone had celebrated his birthday, or the last time anyone even remembered it. When Sammy finished the song, he held out the candle and said, "Make a wish and blow it out." Victor blinked. How did you know it's my birthday? Sammy gave a small, sheepish smile. I peeked at your ID once. His expression fell into a frown. I wanted to surprise you with a cake, but the plan got ruined. Victor reached out and gently patted Sammy's hair, his voice soft. I'm more than happy with this. Sammy smiled again, nudging him. Okay, now blow out the candle. Just as Victor leaned in and puckered his lips, Sammy suddenly placed his hand over them, blocking him. Victor's eyes widened, frozen in surprise as Sammy's hand touched his lips. For a moment, his gaze just lingered on Sammy's face, his chest feeling a flutter. His lingering gaze was broken by Sammy's voice, asking him to make a wish first. Victor hesitated for a moment, then said, I don't know what to wish for. Sammy replied, you can just wish for anything. Long life, more money. Victor then said, I wish for you to still be part of my life on my next birthday, and the next. He didn't know why he said that, but that was just how he felt. Sammy, still too drunk to fully process it, just beamed. Now you can blow. Victor blew out the candle. I'm the first to wish you, right? Sammy asked proudly. Victor nodded. The first and the only. Sammy's face fell a little at that. Without another word, he leaned in and wrapped his arms around Victor in a warm embrace. Happy birthday. Victor felt a warmth spreading through his body as Sammy's body pressed against his. Victor embraced back, feeling himself melting into it. They stayed like that for a while before Victor realized Sammy had long passed out again. Carefully, Victor picked him up again, carrying him to his room. He gently laid him on the bed and pulled the blanket over him. Victor turned to leave, but paused at the door. Then, before he could stop himself, he turned back and slipped under the covers beside Sammy, just to be near him a little longer. And soon, without a single massage, Victor drifted off to sleep. Just being beside Sammy was enough. In the morning, Sammy woke up feeling a bit groggy. He stepped out of his room and found Victor in the kitchen. Victor greeted him, then asked how he was feeling. Sammy replied he was feeling okay, just a bit lightheaded. Victor asked, then would you still want this hangover soup? I woke up early to make it for you. Sammy's heart skipped a beat. He felt a strange little flutter in his stomach as Victor said that. He stared at Victor, his slightly messy hair, tight shirt which accentuated his broad chest. For some reason, he looked even more handsome this morning. Slowly walking over, Sammy mumbled, I want it. Victor smiled and ladled the soup into a bowl for him. As Sammy sat down and took a sip, Victor leaned over slightly. Is it good? Sammy nodded shyly. He didn't even know when he'd started acting shy around Victor. I'm glad you like it, Victor said with a warm smile. After a quiet moment between them, Sammy asked, so, what do you want to do for your birthday? Victor shrugged. I don't know. Nothing, I guess. Sammy asked, should we at least bake a cake? It's not a birthday without one. Victor nodded, agreeing. Great, Sammy said, suddenly excited. Since they had no ingredients at home, they both freshened up and went out to the store. When they returned, they got straight to work in the kitchen. Both of them knew how to cook, but baking was another story. But still, they figured it out together. At one point, Sammy walked to the fridge to grab some eggs. On his way back, he caught a full view of Victor's back. He felt an inexplicable urge to wrap his arms around Victor's waist, to hold him close and feel the warmth of his body. He blinked it away and shook his head, before stepping up to join him again. Soon, the cake was baked, frosted, and decorated. Sammy added candles and prepared to sing happy birthday. However, Victor intervened, mentioning he'd already sung it earlier, in case Sammy had forgotten due to being drunk. Sammy's responded, double blessings, and Victor cracked a slight smile. Sammy proceeded to sing, and after finishing, he asked Victor to make a wish and blow out the candles. Victor stared directly at Sammy. I already made a wish, he said quietly, and I don't want anything else other than that. Sammy's thoughts drifted back to the wish Victor had made earlier, and he felt a flutter in his chest. He set the cake down and left the room briefly, returning with a gift he had prepared for Victor. As he stepped back in, he caught sight of Victor taking a bite of the cake, frosting smeared over his lips. Sammy's eyes locked onto them. A sudden, intense urge to lean in and kiss the frosting off hit him without warning. His breath caught. He quickly looked away, confused. Why am I having these thoughts today? Composing himself, Sammy presented his gift to Victor, a set of essential oils he'd crafted to promote relaxation and improve sleep. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I just made these. I'll understand if you don't like them. I'll do better with my gift next year, I promise. Victor looked at them. I love it, he said without hesitation. You sure? Sammy asked, watching him closely. I have no reason to lie, Victor replied. Sammy let out a relieved breath. I was scared you wouldn't like them. Oh wait, there's something else, he added, pulling out his phone. Victor looked curious. Sammy played a series of voice notes, birthday wishes from their colleagues at the office. Sammy had secretly asked everyone to record messages and had gotten Victor added to the office group chat as a surprise, since they never added him to stuff like that. The last voice note was from Sammy himself. His voice, soft and sincere, wished Victor a happy birthday, including a heartfelt message that left Victor still. Emotion swelled in his chest, and though he tried to blink it back, a tear slipped down. Sammy chuckled, a little shocked. Are you crying? Without a word, Victor pulled him into a hug. Thank you. The hug caught Sammy off guard, and as he was enveloped in Victor's arms, he was suddenly aware of the intoxicating scent of Victor's cologne. It was a smell he'd grown accustomed to, but now it felt different, more potent, especially as he inhaled it from the warmth of Victor's neck. The rest of the day, Sammy made sure Victor felt celebrated. He gave him a spa treatment, cooked a few of his favorite dishes, and even got him to try karaoke for the first time. Victor's sleep improved, and he could now fall asleep on his own at any time. However, every night, he'd still visit Sammy for a massage, which had become an opportunity for them to spend close time together after a long day. But Sammy's feelings had shifted. He'd started noticing Victor in a new light, and found himself being more mindful of his image around him, and easily getting shy. A gentle touch from Victor would send shivers down his spine, and he'd catch himself staring at Victor for longer than necessary, especially when Victor was engrossed in work. Victor's presence had become a distraction, and Sammy couldn't help but feel drawn to him. As they left work and settled into the car, Sammy struggled to fasten his seatbelt. Just as Victor reached to help, their hands touched, and Sammy quickly pulled his hand away, flustered. Victor's expression turned from helpful to confused and slightly hurt. The drive was silent for a while before Victor broke the silence. "Have I done something wrong?" he asked. Sammy shook his head and Victor continued, "I feel like you've been acting weird lately. If I did something wrong, you can tell me," Sammy mumbled. "You've done nothing wrong. It's just my problem." Victor pressed on, "Is something bothering you?" Sammy sighed nervously. "I've been having certain thoughts I shouldn't have. About you." Victor's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of thoughts?" he asked. Sammy hesitated, fearing it might ruin their relationship, but Victor reassured him, "You're safe to tell me. I promise." Sammy took a deep breath. "I think I've fallen in love with you." Victor slammed on the brakes, turning to face Sammy. "What did you say?" Sammy began to panic. "I knew I shouldn't have said it. Things are now going to be awkward between us. I'll just find a new place and move out." Before he could continue, Victor leaned in and kissed him, silencing him. Sammy's eyes widened in shock as Victor slowly pulled back, his face flushed. They stared at each other, their faces still close. Sammy stuttered, "What? You kissed me?" Victor blurted out, "I've fallen in love with you too." Sammy's jaw dropped, and Victor couldn't help but laugh softly as he gently closed Sammy's mouth. Sammy then mumbled, "Why?" Victor replied, "Why? You too, why?" Sammy bit his lip. "I don't know. It just happened, I guess." Victor then replied, "It didn't just happen for me either. I slowly fell for you." Sammy's breath hitched, his face growing hot as he let out a cough, accidentally coughing on Victor's face. He quickly began wiping Victor's face, apologizing profusely. Victor grabbed his hand, stopping him, and looked intently into his eyes with a serious expression. In a low voice, he asked, "Sammy, let's make it official." Sammy's response was a stunned huh. He then mumbled, "Do you think it's okay? I mean, what will everyone think? My hard work will no longer be seen, and any achievement I make at work will be attributed to having a relationship with you. People will gossip, and it won't look good for you as my boss." Victor sighed and replied, "If that's what concerns you, I'll quit." Sammy's eyes widened in surprise. "No, you can't do that," he said. Victor explained, "I know how hardworking you are, and I'm sure everyone else does. But if you're worried about your achievements being tied to me, I can quit. You won't have to worry about me being jobless. I can easily get a new job anywhere." Sammy shook his head. "That would be selfish of me to let you do that. You've worked hard to get where you are, and you've made so many memories in the company." Victor's responded, "I don't really have any memories until you came into my life." Sammy sighed. "You can't quit. Can you give me some time to think about it?" Victor nodded. "You can take as much time as you want. I'll respect and accept any decision you make." He gave Sammy a small, soft smile and a tap on the head before turning back to the steering wheel. Despite Victor's calm demeanor, Sammy could see the disappointment in his eyes. Sammy was torn between his love for his job and his feelings for Victor. He wanted both, but his concerns lingered. He could try to keep their relationship a secret, but that wouldn't be fair to Victor, and he personally disliked the idea of hiding. Instead, he decided to take a chance and give their relationship a try, figuring that if others in similar situations could make it work, maybe they could too. After all, he'd never know unless he gave it a shot. Sammy was lost in thought and didn't realize they had arrived home. As Victor unbuckled his seatbelt, Sammy grabbed his arm, stopping him. "I've thought about it," Sammy said, his words making Victor brace himself for the decision. Victor let out a breath he didn't know he was holding when Sammy said, "I want to give it a try. Let's date." Victor's face lit up with relief and excitement. He took Sammy's hands, asking, "Are you sure?" Sammy nodded, more than sure. Victor's smile grew wider as he pulled Sammy into a tight hug. "I don't know what to say. I was so scared you were going to say no." Sammy chuckled, who was confidently saying he'd accept any decision I made, just a few moments ago. Victor replied, "I would have, but that doesn't mean I won't get heartbroken." Sammy pulled back from the hug, cupping Victor's cheek and kneading it gently. "Did I almost break your heart?" he asked, leaning in to place a quick kiss on Victor's lips. Victor's gaze locked onto Sammy's as his expression turned serious. He placed his hand over Sammy's on his cheek, his eyes drifting down to Sammy's lips. "Sammy," he whispered, his voice low and husky. Sammy's response was a barely audible "huh," his face flushing with flustered anticipation. Victor's eyes remained fixed on Sammy's lips as he leaned in closer, the distance between them shrinking. Sammy's eyelids slowly drooped, his breath catching in his throat, and then, Victor's warm lips touched his. Victor's hand slid from Sammy's cheek to the nape of his neck, fingers curling into his hair as he tilted his head and pressed in deeper. The kiss was slow but consuming, as Sammy melted into it, wrapping his arms around Victor's neck. The kiss deepened, their breathing growing heavier, as Victor's mouth moved against Sammy's, confident and hungry. Later that night, both Victor and Sammy lay in their respective beds, unable to sleep as they replayed the day's events in their minds. Despite having parted ways just minutes ago, they both felt a longing for each other's presence. Victor got out of bed, deciding to head to Sammy's room under the guise of needing a head massage, even though Sammy knew he could sleep well on his own now. Coincidentally, Sammy had the same idea, and got out of bed to head to Victor's room with the same excuse. As they both opened their doors at the same time, their eyes met. They couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation and walk towards each other, their fingers intertwining as they drew closer. "Where were you heading to?" Victor asked. Sammy smiled shyly, biting his lip, and replied, "To your room." Victor leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper, "Me too." They then shared a soft giggle and a warm hug. "I couldn't sleep without seeing you," Victor confessed. Sammy smiled. "We were just together a few moments ago." "But same here," Victor added. "I want to sleep next to you tonight." Sammy asked, "In whose bed?" Victor's responded, "Mine. I want you in my bed. I want your scent stuck on my bedsheet." Sammy teased, "Won't you wash it?" Victor's replied, "I won't." Sammy's face scrunched up, "You," and they both burst out laughing. As they settled into Victor's bed, snuggled together under the covers, Victor spoke up. "I don't think I can fall asleep." Sammy asked, "Why?" Victor answered, "I'm too nervous." Sammy said back, "Honestly, me too." He suggested, "Should we watch a movie?" Victor considered it for a moment before remembering their early start the next day. "But we have to wake up early for work." Sammy nodded in agreement, "Right." They lay there in silence for a moment before Victor's voice broke the quiet. "I don't think sleeping together is a good idea," Sammy asked. "Why?" Victor confessed, "I'm having bad thoughts." Sammy's eyes locked onto Victor's and he asked, "Like what?" Already guessing what it could be, Victor's answer was a sudden, intense kiss. Sammy kissed him back without hesitation, their lips syncing perfectly as soft sighs escaped between them. The kiss deepened than it already was, Victor's hand slipping under Sammy's shirt, gliding across his warm skin from his abdomen to his back. Sammy's hands clutched Victor's shirt, pulling him closer as he craved more of his touch. Quiet moans escaped Sammy's mouth as Victor's lips explored his jaw, neck, and collarbone. Sammy's eyes drifted shut, and he let himself be consumed by the sensation of being wanted and held. His hands roamed Victor's back, nails lightly grazing his skin as they slipped under his shirt. In the morning, Sammy woke up late and rushed to get ready for work, while Victor slept soundly, not even stirring. As Sammy hurried out the door, he hit Victor hard, to wake him, and before Victor could open his eyes, Sammy was already gone. At work, Sammy's rush to get settled made him oblivious to the hickeys on his neck until a colleague pointed them out. "What happened to your neck?" the colleague asked, and Sammy's eyes widened as he checked his reflection on his phone's camera. "Mosquito bites," He lied hastily. The colleague gave a knowing smile, clearly unconvinced. Mosquito bites, huh? Okay, if you say so. Sammy's face flushed with embarrassment as he covered the marks with his hand. A while later, Victor arrived at the office, greeting everyone with a cheerful smile. He walked straight to Sammy, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Sammy tensed up, wondering what Victor would do next. Victor leaned in close. You left something at home. Just as Sammy asked what, Victor kissed him. This. Sammy's eyes went wide as Victor walked away, leaving him stunned. The colleagues behind him gasped audibly, and Sammy turned to face them, his face sheepish. The colleague who had caught him with the hickeys remarked, I wonder when Victor changed his name to Mosquito. Sammy's smile was embarrassed, and the colleagues reassured him, saying they knew this day would come, especially when Sammy suddenly began acting shy around Victor. When Sammy asked if he had been that obvious, everyone nodded in unison. Sammy asked if they had any issues with him dating Victor, and they replied that as long as they kept their PDA to a minimum, they were fine with it. Most of us are single, and don't want to be reminded of it, they joked. They added they had in fact been shipping the two since the beginning, and were glad their ship was finally sailing. Sammy smiled with relief and gratitude, thanking them for their support. During break, Sammy headed to Victor's office to share the news, but Victor was already on his way out. I have a meeting, he explained. I might be late, so you'll have to head home alone after work. Sammy's face fell. I thought we'd have lunch together. Victor's expression softened. I thought so too, but the meeting was spontaneous. Sammy nodded understandingly. Victor's gaze landed on Sammy's hand covering his neck, and he asked, What's wrong? Sammy revealed the hickeys. Victor chuckled. Are you embarrassed? Sammy nodded vigorously. Victor pulled out his handkerchief and tied it around Sammy's neck. Why didn't I think of this? Sammy murmured. As Victor tied the handkerchief, he pulled Sammy closer and kissed him. After finishing, he kissed him again. See you at home. Sammy smiled. I'll wait for you. Victor and Sam's relationship was accepted by everyone, even outside their department, unlike Sammy feared. They even joked about being grateful to Sammy for making Victor more bearable to be around. At work, Victor and Sammy showed off their love, but they also knew when to be professional. At home, though, they could relax and just be themselves. They'd spend their downtime snuggled up together in bed, enjoying each other's company.